Hello, you amazing people. It is Riley LH here again, and we are back with the blue Miata. And this video is being recorded in the future, well, at least this clip, and that's because I'm dumb and forgot to record an intro to this video. But today we are installing AEM's boost and wideband gauges. And since I'm from the future, I know this install went amazing and that the products are amazing. I'm beyond happy with AEM's gauges, so let's go ahead and get into the install of them. Wait, actually, before we get into the video, let's go over what I did in my center console. You guys probably all know my center console for being white with the blue splatter, but I actually changed it up and I did a center console delete. I've only seen one other person do the center console delete with this block off plate here, but I decided to do it and I'm beyond happy with it. So pretty much what I did was I cut off the front part of the center console and just made a sheet metal block off plate. And then same, I did a climate control unit block off plate up here, and it's just sheet metal bent to be the same shape as the climate control unit. And then I made a little shift boot ring that goes around the rubber shift boot that's for the trans tunnel. And it looks really good, and with the gauges in there, I'm beyond happy with it. But now we can actually get into the video. Now it's actually time to install the gauges. I am eventually going to do 3 more gauges in the climate control unit, but for now the boost and wideband gauges are going to be going in these vents. So let's go ahead and take out the center console one more time and start wiring in the gauges. So now that we have everything out of the way and we can access all of our wires, we're going to find 2 switch-powered 12-volt wires. So I did figure out where I'm going to get my 12-volt power from, and it's going to be this blue wire that comes off your ignition. I did go ahead and unplug it and strip back the looming so it's a lot easier, but I'm going to go ahead and cut that back, and I'm going to attach this fuse to that wire and then run this to the tombstone. Then I'll go and splice this wire and have 2 power outputs on it so I can power both gauges. Okay, so now we're going to wrap this around and we're going to solder it in. So we're just going to open up these wires here a little bit. Now we're going to push these wires through, and then we wrap them out around together. We could honestly run this and be fine, but I am going to put some solder in it just to make sure it doesn't come apart. Now that we have some solder on this and it's not coming apart, we can wrap it in some electrical tape. I did forget to mention this. Whenever you're doing anything electrical in your car, make sure you disconnect the negative terminal on your battery. But now that we have this all taped up, we can run this into our center console and be able to get our power. But before we get the gauges in, we actually have to unbox them. So this is AEM's boost gauge. The presentation of these boxes are extremely nice, and I could just rest this on my shelf and be happy. The wiring harness, your sensor, all your wiring connectors, and for the best part, a sticker. Oh yeah, and of course you get the gauge itself. Then with their wideband gauge, of course you get the gauge, a Bosch wideband O2 sensor, your wiring harness, a wiring harness for the Bosch sensor, then another one of these bags with a nipple that connects into your exhaust system for the sensor, and all the wiring connectors. So let's grab both of our wiring harnesses and head back into the car. So instead of running the fuse under the dash, I'm just going to run the wiring under the dash. But first I have to cut a hole in here so my wiring can get through. Now that we have holes cut out in our vents, we can just go and slide these through. Then we're going to slide the rest of the harness under the dash. Okay, so now that we have the wires ran through, I'm going to go and strip back the wiring here. But instead of doing it right at the tip, I'm going to do it in this area and then splice it through, because with these wires, it's pretty much just one solid wire, so it's going to be much easier and much slicker, and make sure I have a better connection by just going and cutting it off in the middle. Now we're going to strip back this wiring just a little bit. Okay, so now it's actually time to solder the connection in. So we're going to do the same with this wire. We're going to push it open a little bit. We're going to feed our other wires through. And now we just twist them together a little bit. Now we're just going to heat our wires up. And now that we got some heat in this wire, we're going to run our solder through. Okay, so now that we have our power wire, we're just going to chuck some electrical tape on it and then go and do our ground wires. Okay, so now we're going to take our black ground wires and we're going to strip them back a little bit. Okay, on the Miata there is a stud right there which works as a perfect grounding point. I already do have one switch grounded to it, but we're just going to go ahead and wire the grounds to there and wrap them around. No soldering required, none of that needed. We just go, wrap it around, and call it a day. Okay, so now that we have it all wired up, let's test the gauges. So we're going to go ahead and plug them in. Okay, now let's plug our battery back in. And now when we turn our key, the gauges should turn on. And both of them work. So now we actually just have to wire the signal into the gauges, which means we have to go and put our sensor in the engine bay for our boost gauge and go and change our O2 sensor. Okay, so I'm going to install the boost gauge sensor first, and all it is just a pressure sensor that we're going to tee off of one of our vacuum lines. And they do provide a tee for you to make this job even easier. So we're simply going to cut a vacuum line that's in the intake. I'm just going to tee off this vacuum line here. We're just simply going to cut it and put that tee in. So now that we have that teed off that vacuum line and ran to where we want, we're gonna just simply push our sensor into that and then run the wire. Okay, so I ran the wire through the firewall and now we just plug it in. Okay, so you can see the boost gauge is now working. I have it all plumbed up and wired up properly. So now let's go ahead and get the car on some ramps and jack it up. So then we can go ahead and replace the stock O2 sensor. Okay, so the car is up and the O2 sensor is already broken loose. I would suggest getting a big wrench like this or just pushing on it as hard as you can with just a big wrench. Though the O2 sensor can be stuck in there pretty hard, but once you get it to break loose, it's extremely easy. And to figure out which connector is the O2 sensor, just look for the one that only has one wire, and that's your O2 sensor connector. So now back under the car, we can just fully undo our O2 sensor. Okay, so now it's actually time to install the Bosch O2 sensor, and this is just a testament to AEM's quality. It already has anti-seize on it from the factory. All the wiring is extremely nice. I have never dealt with any products as nice as AEM's before. So let's go ahead and hop under here and install this O2. Okay, so now that the O2 sensor is plugged in, we just come back into our interior, then we feed that through our center console, and plug it into our gauge. Now our wideband has the information on the air-fuel ratios, but the ECU doesn't. So we have to go and run our wire from the wideband to the ECU. Okay, so this is one of the scariest parts, but you're gonna have to cut your O2 sensor wire. I went ahead and did that and re-loomed the wire because the looming was pretty bad. And then I reconnected it back up to the stock connector, and I got the wire ran all the way to here, and now I'm gonna run it through my firewall. So my soldering iron is heating up and it's the next day, and we only have 2 more wires to do, I think. So we gotta go and get our signal wire from the wideband to our ECU, and we're gonna be going and running off the stock ECU wiring like I showed you yesterday, and we're gonna be taking our white 5-volt output and going and connecting that to our old wire, and then we're gonna be grounding out the brown wire. Okay, so we have our stock O2 sensor wire here in the cabin, as well we have our white and brown wires for our wideband. So we're gonna take our white wire and we're gonna strip it back. And now we're gonna strip our O2 sensor wire. And now we wind these two wires together, and now we get some solder on it. Okay, so now that we have our white wire done, we're gonna go and ground our brown wire. Where I grounded the black wires last is actually where I'm gonna ground this brown wire now, and I'm gonna move the black wires to a grounding point on the engine. Okay, so now that it's all wired up, I have my brown wire mounted there on that stud. I have the white wire off going to the stock O2 sensor wiring, and I have the 2 gauges grounded on the engine. So now let's whip out our laptop, go and change the tune, and then get it started. Okay, so we're now on Tuner Studios, and we're gonna go over to Tools, click Calibrate AFR, and then drop down and hit AEM 30-42. That's gonna be closest to the sensor. Now we're gonna hit right to controller. Okay, now we can hit close. We're gonna go to tuning, and then you're gonna go to AFR/O2 and change that to wideband. So now that it's changed in Tuner Studios, we can actually start the car. So we're gonna turn our key, let the gauge warm up, and then we'll try our first start. Okay, so it's ready. We push on our clutch. And it died. Oh, you can hear my fuel pump's not priming. That's because my fuel pump relay's bad. Let me bypass that real quick and it should work. Okay, so now you can hear my fuel pump priming. So I'm gonna give it a second and get some fuel pressure in the system, and then we'll start it again. Okay, so it is running. So we're actually in the final step of installing the gauge into the vents. So to get these to look like this, it's honestly really simple. There's 3 pieces. There's the bottom piece, the ring, and then there's the eyeball vent itself. What you're gonna do is just take a screwdriver, and you're going there, and you're gonna pop those clips and get those pressed in a little bit. And then you wanna go and take your screwdriver, put it up in there, and you're just gonna twist a little bit. Be gentle. Okay, after a lot of prying, we got it off. So now you can just go and take the vent itself out. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna go and take this piece, and we're gonna go put it in the vent. Just like that. And then we go and put the ring over it. And now clip in. We push that all the way forward. We take our gauge, we push it through, we center it up, make sure it's all looking good. Then we come to our back with the gauge, and we just screw this in. And now that's perfect. So now we just check this back in our center console, and we go and wire it in, and we're good to go. And now we just push this back in. So you can see the gauges are in, and they look amazing. The gauges, plus the center console delete with the delete panel, the climate control unit delete panel, the shift boot with the ring around it. It just looks so good, and I'm beyond happy with it. And if you guys want some of the AEM's products, I'll have their social medias and their website linked in the description. And gauges aren't the only thing they make. They also have boost controllers, ECUs, and pretty much everything else wiring and electronic wise for your car. And if you guys have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. It would mean a lot. I hope you guys all have an amazing day. Peace out.